Hi people, today I will show you Blender preferences. So, sometimes you want to use one option, sometimes the other, and maybe a third one or whatever. So the same with Blender, you have some default settings like for navigation and viewport rendering, hotkeys and so on, but you may want to adjust them either permanently or just for a particular project, right? So if you go to Edit, Preferences. Okay, so we have this pop-up window with preferences and there is an interface tab, so let's check this out. You have this resolution scale, and if you change it, yeah, the scale of the font is changing, right? Not only fonts but also the icons, so basically it is for changing the UI size, and you can use it either to maybe present to somebody, like you are in a room with some people you are presenting, you want to bump the scale because you may use a projector or something like that, or maybe you just prefer a bigger size, or you have some preferences because of your eyes, and maybe you just need a bigger text or smaller because some people may want to use the smaller size if they want to fit as many things in the screen as possible. The splash screen, it will not change anything like visible when I'm switching it, because it will be effective when you open the Blender to create something new. So if you don't want to always have this splash screen presented, just uncheck it. So the splash screen also have some few shortcuts to maybe open the recent file that you have working on and so on. So you may keep it, but if you don't like, yeah, just disable it. Developer extras as well as Python tooltips are more if you want to make some Python script or get involved in Blender development. Tooltips in general are those stuff that, yeah, you see, like you hover over something, you see the tooltips. So in general it is useful, but if you don't want them, you can uncheck, and now I'm hovering and nothing happens, right? Okay, there is a lot of options that I will not cover everything. Actually, I will cover only a few ones because it will be really boring, and I will not even know how to properly cover everyone, because there, like a lot of options that you will not always even realize how to use it, and unless you check in the documentation and you have like a really specific needs and stuff like that. Language you can change. I would advise to stay with English, because even if your English is not the best, you can learn it, and it is useful because the documentation is in English, all the tutorials, not all, but most of the tutorials are in English. The most people probably use it. Let's check themes. So themes are basically how stuff looks. So let's say those colors, like grayish colors, or here for example the blue color background for selected things, so you can change it if you really like some particular style or want to make Blender more similar to your favorite apps, or basically the applications you are familiar with. Mostly you'll see like the default view, default settings, but you may change just one particular thing you don't really like, or you prefer that just have differently. So yeah, here you go. Viewport. Here you have some information like see object info, view name, so user perspective in this case, because it's not top, it's not side, it's not front, it's just some view I have orbited. And yeah, so this is that. If I press 7, it's top top orthographic because it could be top perspective also, right? Because you can change it. Playback FPS is for animation, so if you press space, you can see you have an animation going on. There is no animation at all in this scene actually, but Blender still needs to render all the frames. So you may see that sometimes a red color is visible, and it is because Blender may just drop some frames, and yeah, it is showing you. So you may maybe optimize some things, maybe hide some geometry, maybe simplify materials a bit, stuff like that. Okay, so gizmo size, if you can see, it is doing nothing right now, right? But it is not the case actually. If I select something and select this one, you can see we have now this huge gizmo size. Default one is 75. Okay, so this is default, and we can adjust it, and we can reset to default value, right, if you want. This widget here is interactive navigation. You can use it to orbit the scene and align in particular view, especially if you don't have an additional keyboard with the shortcuts like 7, 3, 1 and so on. You can change it to make it off, so it just will disappear if you not ever use it and don't like it, or just want to have that space clear. Let's change to that simple view mode now, because it will be better visible. The viewport anti-aliasing. This is the default settings, 8 samples, right? And you can zoom in and you can see how it looks. It's not that bad, it's actually quite smooth. And if you disable it to no, you see it is really jagged right now, right? So the edges are jagged, and yeah, it's not that pleasant to look. And if you want to use this viewport render image or viewport animation, it will affect that too. So yeah, it is good to use this aliasing, but of course it would use the best settings by default if there would be no catch, let's say. And the catch is that of course it affects your performance, and depending on computer you use and how advanced your scene is, it may or may not be an issue. So if you want to use like a very complex scene and just focus on modeling, you will not use viewport rendering. You would render everything after all, like a normal render. You may just want to use this no anti-aliasing at all. If you use the viewport rendering though, you may want to bump it up even for like maximum value, and you can see it is looking nice. By the way, if you see when I'm orbiting, it is a bit more jagged, and if I stop, it's getting better. So you just need to give Blender like a few milliseconds or something to you know, just smooth it out. And as you can see, if I select something, the edges are still quite jagged, and it is because you have to check this overlay. So you can see the difference is quite dramatic. And now you can also render it, and yeah, it's just capture that settings, so that is nice. The reason why I made this glowing stuff is except for a better thumbnail and to make it look a bit cooler, is to show you that you have different settings here for the viewport. So if you are using this mode, so it's like this render preview, uh, those settings does not matter that much as those. So if I set one sample here, you can see it's getting really jaggy, right? And the 32 is the default. so it's way better. Okay, so let me check maybe the editing. Okay, so here if you just select something and duplicate, you can choose what data will be duplicated and which will stay like linked. So by duplicating, of course, you're making a whole another copy. So let's say a material, it is linked by default because it's unchecked, right? If you are working on a laptop and don't have a separate keyboard, you may want to check this one, and by checking this you will be able to use 1, 2, 3 keys like normal, those near the escape, to basically align the views. But then what you will lose if you go to edit, like here, right here, you have those modes, right, to select vertices, edges, and faces. And by default, normal 1 to 3 are binned to this. So if you override it, you will lose and you have to click here. So look here now, and I will press G and we'll move it, and you can see the values are changing. And if you look at the mouse now, it is behaving like a Pac-Man, because if I go here to the edge of the viewport, basically it is wrapping to the left side and it is continuing, right? So that is actually very nice. And now I will escape it, but it is good because it will allow you to not be bound to the viewport. If I will uncheck it, G, okay, G, move, and you can see the cursor stops at the edge of the Blender window. The navigation, you can change the way the orbiting is behaving. So by default it's using the z-axis, which is here, right, like an orientation point. What we have next, if you rotate the view, like orbit the view, it is actually looking at the center of the view, right? So as you can see, something like that, and it's just rotating the world. But let's say you want to specifically rotate around this selected object, so you can check this checkbox, and now you see it's like pinning this object. We have more settings here. I will not cover everything, just hover the tooltips, and maybe if you are interested in something and it's not really clear what it is doing, you can check in the documentation. So using the dogs is still cool. I'm using them too, actually, and you don't need to find everything in tutorials, either mine or somebody else. So yeah, use the dogs and experiment. Also, you can just go here and load factory preferences or revert to recently saved ones. And you really like your, if you really like your settings, you can save them, right? One more cool option here is zoom to mouse position. So if you just move around and zoom in the viewport, you'll see that Blender just like scales everything and proportionally from the middle of the viewport. And even if you have mouse somewhere like here, like near this corner, let's say, Blender still zoom like uniformly from this point, right? But if you select it, you may want to orbit a scene a bit to have it affect. And if you move, like say, the cursor here near this corner, if I zoom in now, you see it's like pinned to that point. So yeah, that is nice. And I'm changing here and it's looking at that point, right? So Now here, you see. Okay, the next step will be key map. So, as you may already know, Blender is really hotkey heavy, so it's using a lot of hotkeys. And you probably remember G for moving, R for rotating, S for scaling, and actually when working with Blender you use those so often that if you would need to remember only three of hotkeys, I will say go with those. You may want to search for some hotkeys, let's say bevel, and you can see that in case of Mac at least it is Command B and actually Control B in general, because most of the hotkeys are shared between operating systems. In Mac you just can use both of those, so it's showing Command, but Control is also possible to use. And yeah, you can just readjust it as needed. So yeah. Okay, let's go for our next step, system, right? So, as you can see, you will probably not use that settings too much, but maybe if you have some limited hardware, you may want to maybe experiment with this undo step setting. So it's basically you can limit the number of undo operations that Blender will remember, and you'll get some memory. But to be honest, I haven't like scientifically measure it, how much it really matters and in which cases. So I would say you can stick with defaults unless you want to experiment with it, or you're just curious, or you have like really complex stuff and you need to optimize wherever you can. Save and load, it's like a save prompt, so it will ask you, do you really want to close because you have not saved, and you may lose it. So there are more tabs and I will not cover everyone. Let's go to add-ons, because actually this is not a preference, I would say. It is just a way to extend Blender, so you can just enable, disable and install and additional features, and those features will allow you to either extend the possibilities of Blender or just change some stuff, or maybe add some additional UI so you can maybe do something more quickly, stuff like that. Extra. Okay, so add mesh extra objects. It is disabled by default, but Blender actually provides some add-ons like bundled with each installation, and this is one of those. So let's check it. Okay, and now when I will do Shift A, let's click Shift A, mesh, and you can see we have bunch of other options that we can use, and let's maybe use gear. Okay, and as you can see we have this gear now, and it can be adjusted pretty much as the default objects, so you can, you know, use the number of teeth, the radius, stuff like that. And by the way, you can find a lot of add-ons, either paid ones or free, in various of websites, and provided by various developers, and you can then just install here with this button, and it will pop up the install screen. I will not cover the add-ons more because in this video, because this is a topic for another video. I just wanted to show you that even those add-ons are actually like an additional features and some changes to Blender. Those are located in the preferences, so it may not be like super intuitive to find it here, but now you know. By the way, I have mentioned manual. and if you go help and you click manual, it will open the website with the manual, and manual is good to find some details about some stuff that will not be maybe covered in tooltips or with tutorials. Okay, so I hope that you find that useful, and you might need some of those things maybe in the future or now, maybe permanently or just for some single projects or just for a few minutes wherever. But yeah, you have that power, you can change some stuff, and it will basically adjust how the Blender works and how displays stuff, how it interacts with you. Okay, so if you liked it, press like. If you have some thoughts, just comment below, and maybe even just say hi if you don't have any specific thoughts. If the video was perfectly clear and the best it could be, yeah, I doubt it, but uh, just say hi. That would be nice. And last but not least, if you are not already subscribed, please subscribe. It will help my channel to grow, and it will show you more of my videos. And then I could justify spending more and more time to making those videos. And yeah, you will just get more more videos, and I will get more viewers. Happy blending and have a nice time. See you next time. Bye. Options, preferences, and I need to eat something, so I'm thinking, which pizza should I get? Okay, bye.